Have you ever had one of those moments where something just feels off? That creeping sense that you're being watched or followed, even when everything around you seems perfectly normal. I had one of those moments recently, and it's a feeling I can't shake. It started this past spring break, and it's left me questioning the safety of the place I once called home. It's 2024 as I'm writing this. I'm a senior, just weeks away from graduation. For me, spring break has never been about wild beach parties or chaotic trips to Miami. I'm the type to recharge by heading home, away from the stress of finals and the constant noise of campus life. So when the break finally arrived, I packed my bags, tossed my textbooks aside, and headed back to my quiet suburban neighborhood. That Monday morning, I stuck to my usual routine, a morning workout to clear my head and keep me focused. It's the one part of my life that gives me a sense of control, a habit I refuse to break even on vacation. I rolled out of bed at 6 a.m., laced up my shoes, and hit the road by 6:20, determined to start the day strong. The drive to my gym is about 15 minutes through sleepy residential streets, lined with neat, manicured lawns and perfectly trimmed hedges. It's the kind of place where nothing ever happens, peaceful, predictable, maybe even a little too quiet at times. But as I made my way down one of those familiar streets, something strange caught my eye. Parked along the curb, half hidden by overgrown bushes, was an old rusted ice cream truck. Its faded, peeling paint clung to its sides like a forgotten memory, the words "Frosty Treats" barely visible through years of wear. It's the kind of thing you'd expect to see on a hot July afternoon, not on a chilly March morning when the trees are still bare and the air has that sharp, lingering bite of winter. It felt completely out of place, like a misplaced prop from a forgotten horror movie. I slowed down as I passed it, peeking through the foggy driver's window, but the cab was empty, just an abandoned truck sitting there in the cold, grey morning. I shook off the weird vibe, turned up my music, and kept driving. After a solid workout, I grabbed a quick breakfast and headed home, already feeling like I'd made the most of my morning. But as I turned onto the same street from earlier, I felt my stomach tighten. The ice cream truck was still there, parked in the exact same spot. That didn't sit right with me. My neighborhood is the type where people notice things, nosy, watchful, and always ready to call the police if something seems off. For that truck to have just been sitting there all morning without someone complaining was odd. I looped around the block, this time slowing down even more as I passed. I caught a glimpse of the driver. He had a long, pointed nose, a tangled mess of a beard, and eyes that flicked toward me as I drove by. Our gazes met for just a second, but that was enough to send a chill down my spine. He gave me this sharp, knowing look, the kind that makes you instinctively tighten your grip on the steering wheel. I sped up and made the final turn toward my house, heart thudding a little too fast. Back home, I tried to shake off the encounter. I played some video games, scrolled through social media, anything to distract myself. But that image of the driver, his eyes locked onto mine, kept creeping back into my mind. Later that afternoon, I headed out to check the mail, and as I reached the end of my driveway, I froze. Parked a few houses down, half hidden by shadows, was that same ice cream truck. It hadn't moved far, just enough to be out of direct sight from my front door. My pulse quickened. This wasn't a coincidence. I grabbed the mail and walked back inside, trying to keep my pace normal, resisting the urge to break into a run. I locked the door behind me and made a beeline for one of the guest bedrooms upstairs, the one with a perfect view of the street. I pulled the curtain aside just enough to peek out, my breath fogging up the glass. The truck was still there, and this time I could see the silhouette of the driver, motionless, staring straight ahead. I watched for what felt like hours, but the truck didn't move. The driver didn't get out. He just sat there, his shadowy form blending into the gloomy interior of the cab. A night fell, and I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just some harmless, if not slightly creepy guy trying to make a living. But around 3 a.m., I woke to the faint, haunting sound of an ice cream truck jingle drifting through the darkness. My heart froze. I sat up, straining to hear. The music was distant but unmistakable, that same high-pitched mechanical tune that had echoed through my childhood summers. I crept to the window, my hands trembling as I pulled the curtain back. The ice cream truck was parked directly in front of my house now, its headlights glowing faintly in the misty street. Before I could even process the horror of the scene, something tapped softly against my window. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest, and dropped the curtain. I didn't look again. I called the police, my voice shaking as I stumbled over my words, trying to explain what was happening. When the patrol car finally arrived, the truck was gone, its tires leaving faint, muddy tracks on the rain-soaked pavement. This happened a few years ago during a rough patch in my life. I was in my mid-30s, single, and coming off the end of a 5-year relationship. The breakup had left me pretty shattered, and I'd slipped into a routine of isolation. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, and lose myself in the endless loop of mindless movies trying to drown out the loneliness. Weekends were the worst. I'd barely eat, barely move, just existing in the shadow of what my life used to be. One Saturday night, I found myself slouched on the couch in my room, a dark, second-floor space that had become my little cave. The glow of the TV flickered against the walls, the only source of life in an otherwise silent house. I wasn't really watching, just letting the noise fill the void. I remember glancing at my phone. It was just after 9 p.m. My mom had called a few times that day, but I let it ring out. I couldn't face the questions about how I was holding up. I just couldn't. I clicked on a random horror movie, something I'd never heard of, just to pass the time. It was one of those cheap, grainy, low-budget flicks that somehow made it onto the streaming platform. The audio was a mess, muffled voices, overblown sound effects, the kind of film you leave on more for background noise than actual entertainment. About 20 minutes in, I started noticing a strange sound mixed into the film's chaotic audio. It was this sharp metallic clang, like a pipe striking concrete. It didn't match anything happening on screen. There were no construction scenes, no metal pipes, nothing that explained the noise. It seemed out of place, almost like a glitch in the sound design. But for some reason, I kept watching. After a while, I got up to use the bathroom. For whatever reason, I paused the movie instead of letting it play, which I usually didn't bother to do. As I sat back down and hovered over the play button, that sharp, metallic clang cut through the silence again. But this time, the movie was paused. I froze, my thumb still hovering over the remote. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. That sound hadn't come from the movie. It had come from inside my house. I sat there completely still, listening for any other noise. Nothing, just the low hum of the TV and the distant hum of my neighbor's air conditioner. I tried to convince myself I was just hearing things, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But then, about 45 seconds later, the clang echoed through the house again. I jumped to my feet, grabbing the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a heavy metal flashlight from my desk. I crept down the hallway, checking every room as I passed. The kitchen, the living room, the guest bathroom, all empty. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. I moved back toward the stairs, my pulse racing. That's when I realized my bedroom window was open. I'd cracked it earlier to let in some fresh spring air. Slowly, I approached the window, my heart thudding in my chest. I peeked through the blinds, out into the dark backyard, and that's when I saw it. A lone deck chair had been dragged out to the middle of the lawn, maybe 20 feet from the house. Standing next to it, illuminated by the faint glow of my neighbor's porch light, was a kid. A young boy, no more than 10 or 11, holding what looked like a long metal pipe in his small hands. He must have sensed my eyes on him, because he slowly turned his head toward my window. For a split second, I locked eyes with him, wide, unblinking, and eerily calm. Then, without warning, he slammed the pipe against the chair, sending another metallic clang echoing through the yard. I stumbled back from the window, my heart nearly leaping out of my chest. I don't know why, but something about the way he moved, the slow, deliberate strike of the pipe, chilled me to the bone. I reached for my phone to call the police, but as I glanced back out the window, he was gone. The chair was still there, perfectly centered in the yard, but the boy had vanished into the night. The police came and checked the area, but they didn't find anything. No footprints, no sign of the boy, just an old rusty pipe leaning against my fence, right where the boy had been standing. I still think about that night sometimes, and it always sends a shiver down my spine, because if that boy was real, what was he doing out there? And if he wasn't, what did I really see? Why do we always think of spring as beautiful? What if it's just a mask for something much darker? Ellie never feared the forest. Every spring, as the snow melted and the leaves returned, she'd wander the woods behind her grandmother's house for hours. She called it her escape, the place she felt most at peace. But this year, the forest felt different. The air was too still. The birds didn't sing as much, and Ellie started noticing things, subtle, strange things like carvings on trees she didn't remember, whispers that came from nowhere. At first she blamed the wind, the echo of her own footsteps, anything but what it really was. It started with a single word. One afternoon, while sketching wildflowers near an old oak, Ellie heard a voice drift through the trees. A child's voice, soft, fragile, and whispering her name.
Ellie?
She spun around. Nothing but sunlight filtering through the branches. The next day, she brought her friend Mason. He didn't believe her, of course, but when they found the photograph, a weathered black and white image pinned to a tree with a rusty nail, he changed his mind. It showed a girl standing in that exact forest clearing. Ellie flipped it over.
April 12th, 1964.
Abigail, our sweet spring girl. They both felt it. A shift in the air, like they'd disturbed something that didn't want to be found. They tried to leave, but the path had vanished. Where winding trails once were, now stood twisted trees and silence so deep, it rang in their ears. Then the swing creaked. In the middle of a small clearing they had never seen before was an old wooden swing, hanging from a blackened tree. It moved on its own.
We need to go now.
But Ellie couldn't move. She felt something cold close around her hand. She looked down, a child's hand, but no child attached to it. She screamed. The hand vanished, the swing stopped, and the voice came again.
Come play.
They ran, tripping over roots, branches clawing at their clothes. When they finally broke through the trees and made it back to the house, they didn't speak a word. That night, Ellie's grandmother told her the truth. In the spring of 1964, a little girl named Abigail disappeared in those woods. Search parties combed every inch. She was never found. The strange part? Ellie had never told her grandmother the name from the photo. They say spring is when life returns. But sometimes the things that come back were never meant to.